Hey, what's up everybody? Kyle Buckland here with the Artful Souls. Got a rainy day, so you might hear some rain on the roof of the studio. But I decided to come inside and paint a portrait for you guys today. So several of my viewers have been asking, can you do a portrait? And every now and then I'll paint a portrait just for fun. One reason why I like to paint them is because they're hard to paint. And my philosophy is if there's something that you're struggling with, then make sure you really hit that hard and figure out how to do it, because you don't want to be a one-trick pony. And so what I'm saying is, there are going to be certain things that you'll find that are more difficult than others for you to paint. For me, it was always faces, and because of that, I tried really hard to kind of zero in on painting portraits. And it took some time to learn how to paint them. So I wanted to share that with you. I'll talk a little bit about my colors I got laid out here, sort of the usual suspects. Permanent matter deep, cadmium red light, cadmium yellow light, but I threw in this permanent green light. So that's a new color that I don't usually use. But this portrait of I'm actually painting Billie Eilish. She has a really green shirt on, and so I wanted something that'll be very vibrant. And there's going to be hints of that green bouncing up into her skin tones and stuff. So just for the fun of it, I mean, I probably could have mixed a green, but I went ahead and put out that green. Sometimes if I have a color that's just especially vibrant in a certain piece, I'll pull out a different type of paint and put it out just for fun. Phthalo blue and then ultramarine blue. Down the left I've got burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and then over here in the corner, I don't know if you can see it, but I've got some ivory black. So yeah, you can see it just right there. I've got my medium over here in my medium cup, so let me put that so it's on camera. This is just a little bit of Galkit painting medium mixed with Gamsol paint thinner, so 2/3 Galkit painting medium with 1/3 Gamsol. Working on 11 by 14 linen panel, and I've got bristle brushes, flats and rounds, and then we'll probably use a couple little synthetic brushes too when we get to some of the detail stuff. Now, there are going to be some things that are the same, that I approach the same way when I'm painting a landscape, and there'll also be some differences. So, one thing that I want to do right off the bat is figure out where in the canvas do I want my face to be, my portrait. So just like when we paint landscapes, I have to try to envision what I want this painting to end up looking like when it's finished. So to do that, I'm going to look here and I say, I want the top of the head. I'm going to try to be pretty faithful to the actual photograph. So I want to make sure that I leave enough room down here on the bottom for this green shirt and where her neck comes down. So really, the bottom of her chin is just below the halfway point. So I can't just draw a big face in here because then I won't have room for her shirt. So I have to look, and if it helps, you can draw some lines and divide the canvas up into quarters. So let's say I draw a line straight down the middle here. This is just blue, just a little bit of ultramarine blue, and then I'm just going to kind of estimate where this middle line is here and here. So we get a nice quarters. We divide the canvas up. Now, and now I kind of have a frame of reference here for. Okay, so her chin comes just down below the halfway point, so like right in here, right? But her face doesn't really extend out very far either. Her hair actually comes out, quite a bit, but her face is going to be fitting into this little section right in here. So with that in mind, I'm going to say, well, where's the top of her forehead? So it's like right in here somewhere. Then we've got this kind of her hairline, and I just want to kind of get the general shape of the face. So resist the urge to start putting in details, just like when we do the landscapes. We're just looking for the main shapes here. Now, that should give me enough room, and we'll throw in a little burnt sienna here, so burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. That should give me enough room to get her shirt and her hair in there like I want. Now look here, the neck doesn't come, straight like when we think of cartoons, it comes almost out of the chin, but her neck comes almost right out straight down from the edge, usually about the edge of her eyeball. So before I get that neck in there, let's do something. Let's figure out where her eyes and her nose and her lips are going to be in this shape here. So the eyes are going to be somewhere around the center, if the top of the head is actually right here. So somewhere in the center between here and here is where we want the eyes. And if I look up here, her eyes are just a little bit higher. So this is where you're going to start to get into these little individual things that make a person look like that person. Her eyes are going to be right in there. I'm just going to put lines right now for where these are. Her nose is going to be like right in here. And then her lips, she has really large lips. Her top lip is almost as wide as her bottom lip, which is not typical, and probably what gives her part of her look that's very unique. I like painting unique faces, so she definitely has a unique face. So that's going to be the center of her lips right there. Now her bottom lip comes down here, but her top lip, look at this, her top lip comes all the way up here. So just mapping out where that is. Now her nose has a little line that kind of comes down like this, but it comes out a little further. So I'm going to go ahead and put that out there. And then right here. Now sometimes, you know, people's faces aren't necessarily exactly symmetrical. Sometimes they're a little off-center, and in fact, with this photograph, we're looking at a little bit more of the left side of her face. Well, it'd be actually the right side of her face, but on the left side of the canvas, the right side of her nose, we're seeing a little bit more of that. So what I'm going to do is draw the center line of her nose kind of off to the right just a little bit. I'll just make a line straight down. That's actually where the center of her nose is. Then it's like her lips kind of come over a little bit. So see what I mean? Her face is not exactly symmetrical. We don't want to draw them symmetrical. That's going to be, you know, make the face look kind of boring and mechanical. Now we can draw her lips here. I'm going to pay attention to these lines. I'm always looking up and down. You know, where does the end of her mouth come into the relationship of her eyeballs? Well, the end of her lips right here are lined up almost perfectly with her iris. So let's put that iris in right there. Same thing over here. This one's actually just a little bit over. So remember I was talking about there's just little differences. And we can go ahead and just put in some quick lines here for her lips. Her top lip comes up way further than you think. There's usually a little shadow where the lips come together here. And there's also a shadow under her bottom lip because her bottom lip is sticking out. So we need to think about, you know, we've got the light coming down from the top, so her lip's going to cast a shadow, and her nose is going to cast a shadow too. So we'll just go ahead and put in a shadow there for her nose and a shadow here for her lips. And in fact, that might come down a little thicker, so maybe get that right there. Now, her eyebrows, let's see the angles of her eyebrows. Her eyebrows are very straight, and then they just have a little curve at the end here. So they kind of come up here like this. But now, this line starts right here, and it's just almost a straight line. It comes down like that. You see that? We might need to adjust that. So if you need to, just wipe it out. You can use your finger or a paper towel. Let's put that a little bit higher. It's good to go ahead and kind of nail these shapes as best as possible early on, because it's hard to make adjustments like this with your big shapes later on. And her hair comes down over that one, so we don't actually see where it turns back in. Now her eyes, again, I'll place the irises, then we're going to kind of build up this almond shape around them. Now her eyes are very specifically shaped. This top line comes up like this and around like this, which is very unique features. Now the bottom line is like almost, it comes down, it comes straight across almost right here, then comes up just a little bit. So we're already starting to get a little bit of a likeness because we're paying attention to those little subtle things that make her who she is and how she looks. Now, let's go ahead and put her hair in there before we get too carried away. Now, her hair actually comes out. So her hair actually takes up probably a good chunk of this space. We can look at the amount of space that's between the edge of the canvas and her hair, and we can see that her hair actually comes out. You can measure this with your thumb. You can take your brush like this and actually just put it up to the photograph and make a mark with your thumb how far out the brush comes. So I'm going to hold it at arm's length, and I'll measure it, and I'll come over here and I'll say, alright, so from her nose to the beginning of her hair is about the same width as her hair. So we'll come down right there. It's a little wider on this side. It comes in right here. So I'm just looking for these big shapes right now. I don't want to get in there, just like when we do our trees. Now's not the time to get in there and try to draw every hair. We just want this big shape of her hair. This comes down all the way out to the bottom. Same thing with this. When it comes out, this comes over here. Comes off the right side of the canvas. And her hair comes up like this. There's a little curve right there, you can see. Comes up like that. Up like that. So we're just mapping out her features basically. Now, some of this will get covered up as we go. Let's figure out what this shape is right down here. And again, just like when I'm just looking at shapes, don't get too caught up with what you're painting. Just want to look at the big shapes here. So like you can see, like, where does this line, if this line were to keep going, it comes out pretty much where her shoulder comes out on the other end of her hair. So you can kind of visually connect those lines, and that might help you draw the lines. Now, that's all the drawing I'm going to do. And like I said, we might cover some of that up. Now, unlike the landscape, with the landscape I start with my darks. With portraits, I'm going to start with a middle tone and kind of work my way into my darks, which will push them back further, and then pull the lights out. So what I want to do is mix up a skin tone. So now to do this skin tone, I'm going to mix up cadmium red light, yellow ochre. Let me get a little angle on that palette so we don't get such a glare, because I know eventually we're going to start getting a lot of glare on that. So if I get it right here, I might cut back. If that made it worse, I think that might have made it worse. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's better. We'll leave it like that. Okay. Touch of ultramarine blue, so that was cadmium red light, yellow ochre, a little ultramarine blue, and just a touch of that ivory black. And then white. Now we can kick this whichever way we need it. I'm going to actually throw in a little bit more yellow ochre and a little bit more cadmium red light. Now I'm getting somewhere. A little bit of white. I don't want to go too light or too dark. I want this to be a middle tone. Now, we can test it. That might be a little too dark. I'm going to lighten it just a little bit with some white and some yellow ochre. I'm going to test it on there. I'm going to lighten it just a little bit more. Now that I've got this, I'm going to kind of mask this in. For the majority of the places here, we'll come back with some darker tones and hit some things. I'm going to paint around her eyebrows and around her eyes. What I want to do is kind of get this masked in. Then we can push some areas darker and pull some areas out that are lighter. I want to try to keep an eye on where my lines are so that I don't lose that And we won't paint her lips. Obviously, they're going to be a different tone. But start with the middle tone when we do portraits. We'll go ahead and put the same tone down here for her neck. Which, like I said, this is nice and thin because we'll come back and adjust this. We're going to make darker areas and lighter areas. Now that we've got that, let's mix up some darker shadows. So burnt sienna, little ivory black, little ultramarine blue, little cadmium red light. I'm looking for a warm shadow here. Now, it's going to be a touch darker, and we're going to figure out where these shadows are. There's a nice shadow that kind of comes straight down here. That comes in here. There's a nice shadow that runs. This is the shadow cast by her hair. A little darker because under the eyelids it's nice and dark. So not the eyelids, but in the eye sockets actually. And we'll come back and redraw some of these shapes. Just a hint of this around the edge of her nose here. Now, instead of trying to get in there and paint her nostrils and everything right now, I just want this shadow. I'll come back. We'll come back and draw in some details, but really just this big shadow. Same thing with under the lip. There's this nice big shadow here. So we're just painting the shadows. Under her eye there's a shadow. And as we come over to this side, it gets more shadowed. It's the same thing under here. Remember, you're drawing right now, so you're actually making the shape of her chin when you're doing this part. So pay attention to your shapes. Now let's take a smaller brush. We'll do like a number 2, like that brush we were doing. And do we have darker darks? Are there some areas? Let's get in here and paint some darker dark areas. So like her irises and her in her eyes are kind of a dark. Her eyes are actually light blue, but looking at this compared to everything else, they're actually pretty dark. So I'm just going to get in there with kind of this bluish gray and paint those irises in right there. And now I've got this darker, cooler tone. There's some areas in here where I can kind of accentuate some of these shadows. Right there's a darker piece. Right in here's a little bit of a darker piece. It's like putting pieces of a puzzle together. And let's go ahead and make something just a little darker. Burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. Look at her eyebrows. They're not very warm. They kind of have a cool tone. And you have to be okay with these portraits looking a little odd for a bit, because we're working our way up to the finish. We can't make them look like we want them right off the bat. We have to be patient. So again, I'm pushing these areas back with this darker tone. See, there's actually some little, I can put in her nostril. And maybe this little dark line above her, just where her eyelid is. Now let's mix up a red. So cadmium red light. I'm going to go back into that skin tone because her lips have some of her skin tone in it, but the top lip's a little darker than the bottom lip, but right now I'm going to make them the same and then I'll come back and adjust them. So again, I'm paying attention to value. It's very important. It's a little lighter on this left side, so just mix a little lighter tone. Just hit that in. And actually I'll make this bottom lip just a little lighter than the top. Now that top lip comes down like this, it's big. comes down, and there's a little dark bit to the corner. It's very thin right at the corner. And there's a little bit of a warm shadow around her nostril. So I got this warm tone, so I'm looking where else can I use it? Well, I can use it right in here. And under her eyes. It's nice and warm. Now, let's redraw some details, because we start obliterating them too much, we'll start to lose the likeness. So I'm going to come back with a real small synthetic brush. This is a tiny, tiny, tiny flat synthetic brush. And make a nice dark purple. And I want to get in here and really try to nail these shapes early on, because if I lose them, it's hard to get them back. So like this part of her nose right here comes down here. Then her nostril, I'm going to make it just a little darker, a little bit more ultramarine blue. Her nostril comes up like this. It's just a little shape. A lot of times it's less than what you'd think it needs. And there's this nostril over here. Well, I've got this dark blue. I'm going to go ahead and hit her pupils. Maybe add a little tiny bit of black to that, not a lot. Then I can use that dark too to draw that line above her pupils at the bottom of her eyelids where her eyelashes are. Eilish's eyelashes. Okay, let's see. What a unique face, huh? And her eyebrows actually have a little that action going on right there, just to kind of break them up just a little bit. And then there's a nice dark line right in here too. So see, like while I've got this dark on my brush, I'm going around and picking out areas where I can use it. Her hair actually comes down right here, so it actually comes very close to her eye there. Let's look at the shape of the shadow beneath her nose. It actually comes down right in here a little more. Yeah, just like that. Now there's a little line right between her two lips, and it's actually warm, so I'm going to add a little bit of that permanent matter deep to this. And it's thin right here, and then it gets a little thicker in the middle. See that? And then it comes up like this and around like that. So just little subtle things. Now watch this. The white of her eyes is actually gray, and beginners always make this value too light. This is because we think, oh yeah, the white of the eyes. But look at the value of it compared to even the parts of the middle tone that we put in for her skin. It's a little bit darker than that. So we don't want it to be too light. We can always make it lighter if we want to, but always err on the side of darker, you know, when you're doing these whites of her eyes here. It's just a nice gray, actually. And let me get this hair. This hair comes down and it cuts off her iris. So like, do I need to move her eye over a little bit? I think I do. Remember I said it's hard to make these adjustments later, so try to go ahead and get these. Her eye comes over here. Yeah. That actually made it look more like her when I did that. You see that, how that happened. So now there are some shadows around her face. by the bottom that start to get some of that green color in it, but I don't want to do them yet because I want to wait till after I lay in that. So let's move away from the detail now. We kind of got her likeness going on, and I don't want to overwork anything right yet. So I'm just going to push this shadow just a little bit more. There's a shadow right there. But let's go ahead and figure out what we're doing with her hair and her shirt and all that stuff. I try to get in there and just nail some of that hard stuff first, because I don't, you know, getting the likeness is the trickiest part to this business when you're painting portraits, and you don't want to try to work too much around something that's not going to look like her. So once we got the likeness, we come back and work on it, but let's go ahead and move around now. Burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, a little phthalo blue. Her hair is not a traditional hair color, so we got to look. You know, we can't just use our brains. Little cadmium red, little permanent matter deep. It's like this crazy silvery purple color, but it also has different values in it. So we're going to start with the darks. So I want a dark purple. It's not super purple. And figure out where the darkest parts of her hair is, and it's actually got a little bit more phthalo blue in it. It comes down in here. And just nice big broad brush strokes for this. You're just painting the shape that her hair makes up. You're not painting all the hairs. So don't try to get in there with a little brush and paint every individual hair. That would be maddening, and it's just going to look silly. Alright, now I'm going to take the same tone and lighten it, add a little bit of permanent matter deep. I'm just going to warm it up just a little bit more white. Now I need to push this lighter. This is a silvery quality to this. And I mixed in my medium into my white, so my white's nice and goopy. That's a real technical term, right? But you've seen how I do that. I mix that white paint, whip that white paint up. So there's light here. So we've got light, we've got dark, and then we'll come back and kind of hit some of those mid-tones in between. This is light over here. We don't even have to go up and down. See, we can go side to side here. We're just getting these tones. We can come back and brush some darks back into this light here. So I'm going to come back with my darker purple, that same color we were using in the beginning. A bit of phthalo blue. Give it that cool color. Little burnt sienna, a little ultramarine blue. You'll get better at this color mixing business the more you do it, so just hang with me here. I know I'm mixing colors fast, but I'm just kind of going on my intuition here because these are such odd colors in her hair. Cadmium red light, ultramarine blue. I'm going back into my mixture. There's a dark here that I want to get. That's where her hair parts, and then this little pit here that comes down like this. It's important. Then we'll come back in right into some of that light with some of this dark. So I'm building up lights and darks in her hair, creating some form. It's a nice phthalo blue dark up in here. This is kind of, it's nice and blue up in there. So it gets blue right along the edge there. It's nice and nice and straight down here, but it's lighter. Go ahead and scoop up the paint, you know, for these lighter sections. And see, like there's a little light bit of hair right in here. Instead of trying to paint it real thin, I can paint it thick and then come back and I can shape it up with a dark. So I'm going to come back now with my darker color, darker hair color, and we'll shape it up. cut back into it. So it's like you're thinking like a sculptor, less like a painter. I mean, you know, not like, it's not like you're thinking like a painterly painter is what you're doing. You're not thinking about just filling in the lines and the shapes. You're thinking about pushing one tone into the next, really cutting into areas with your paint. Like this dark here, we'll take this dark and just come right down in here and cut into some of that light. See that? Okay. Now, don't want to go too much further with that. We can come back and work on it later. But let me get a new brush because I want this color to be nice and clean. So nice clean brush. Cadmium yellow light, permanent green light. This is like a neon shirt. So what we don't want is any other color getting into this mixture. We want this to be nice and clean. Just this yellow and this green and white. And it's super light value right in here. Nice thick paint too. So there's, see this? Comes down in here. Now we can cut back with our shadows. So let's go ahead and just mass in this nice light green value, which is, you know, very light, right in here. And be careful not to get your brush dirty with that. You know, don't paint into the hair yet. We'll do that last. Get all your nice light areas first. Then we can come back and hit some areas where it's coming through the shirt, but where it's coming through her hair, like right now. But once we do this, once we get this coming through the hair, it's going to pick up some of that color from her hair and put it on the brush, so it won't be as clean of a green. So we'll save that till we. So it's like right there. There's actually a nice little dark bit of green that comes right along here, and there's some darker green right along this side. It comes in at an angle like that. Now let's take a smaller brush, like a number 2 flat, and make, this is permanent green light. And I want this to be nice clean color, so I'm really not going to mix it too much. Maybe just a touch of that cadmium yellow light to make the tone for the shadows here. And then nice and thick with lots of medium on your paint. And you should be able to paint right over top of that light. See, that just comes right in there. This comes up like this. Painting the shadows in there. Then it kind of surrounds her hair, this darker green too, because her hair kind of casts a shadow. It kind of comes up in here just a little bit too, so kind of outlining some of that lighter green with that darker green. Now let's go ahead. Well, we've got this green on our brush. Let's put a little bit of it in this shadow here. And back to thin paint now, because these flesh tones, we don't want them to get too gunked up with thick paint. So we want flesh is thin, transparent. We want to paint it that way right now. We'll put maybe some highlights on later. That are a little thicker, but like right underneath of her. So these are the planes that are facing down and catching that light off of her shirt. We've got to make sure the value's right too. I mean, just because we have this color doesn't mean we just put it up there. We got to make sure it's the right value. So this is making it, and there's a little bit of a cooler, have a phthalo blue. Use some of the tone that's in her hair bouncing, because that's what it is. It's bouncing off of her hair too. So it's got the hair color, the shirt color, and that's what's making up some of the colors of these shadows under here. So you got to understand how light bounces all around the subject. And some of this color is actually getting up into under her eyes too. It's just subtle, but like just right in here, but it's darker. So we got to make sure that we're staying in the value range that we want. See that? Now, while we're in there, let's go ahead and shift. I see some red, kind of a pink, so cadmium red light going back into the flesh tone, the middle tone, but just making it a little more red, and kind of the same value as what we have. So we're not shifting value much, we're just shifting temperature. So remember how much I talk about value and temperature and all that when we're painting landscapes. It's not just a landscape thing. If anything, it's even more important when you're painting portraits. I'm going to shift that just a little lighter right in here, because now we're going to start pulling some of these areas forward. So just like we push those shadows back, we can start pulling some of this stuff forward. So cadmium, so yellow ochre, a little bit of white, back into the flesh tone, a little more white. We can start using thicker paint. Maybe there's a little green in there. And let's figure out what this... Now we're not doing the highlights yet. So these are just our lights. So we've got the mid-tone and the shadows. We also have highlights and accents. You know, the shadows are like our darks, but they're not our accents. These are our lights, but they're not our highlights. So like where's the light hitting? So like her nose comes down in here. Kind of like that, and then it kind of actually swings up a little bit too. Every feature that she has is unusual, but in a intriguing kind of way, which is I think what gives her her look. When you look at her, you go, you know, that's just an interesting looking face. This is a light plane. So now I'm changing the plane. So see, like this comes out to where her lips are. So I'm using this lighter tone to pull that plane forward a little bit. Same thing over here. So there's a plane right in here. Comes out a little bit. See that? It's subtle, but that's what we want. This comes out a little bit where her cheekbone is. It's here. Her forehead catching a nice little bit of light. And I might lay out some more white paint because pretty soon I'm going to be out of my... It's going to be all colored, different colors. Actually, there's a nice cool light right here on her forehead. Let's get that in there. We're working our way up towards like this highlight area, like this highlight value. So like while I've got this nice light on my brush, there's a nice little highlight that comes down her nose. Like that. And there aren't a lot of these highlights, so that's probably good for right now. Now let me figure out what's going around her mouth. See, there's still some white of the canvas showing, and we want to get rid of that. So there's a little light plane right here where her lip starts to turn up and catch the light. And we can kind of cut back into that just a little bit. This cooler shadow tone. I need like a little more transition there or something. I don't want to lose this dark shape that comes right up in here. See, this is dark. And it's red right here. Still part of that shadow. Well, let's get back in here with our little tiny synthetic brush. And black, ivory black, go back into our dark here because we don't want straight up black, but we want it pretty dark. Before we do too much over here, I want to get these details nailed in, and there's a practical reason for that, because I use my pinky a lot when I'm painting details. So I'm going to be putting my pinky here a lot. So I don't want to get this area completely finished because then it'll have all my little pinky brush strokes. So now what I want to do is get the face finished, then I'll paint the background. So let's go ahead and draw these lines. So there's a line that comes up here where her eyelashes are. And a line that comes kind of around her iris. Then there's another line right above that, the crease of her eyelid. And this starts all the way down here. Figure out where these lines are and then just put them in there. Don't second guess yourself, because you need to figure out where they go and then put them in there. So take your time to look and go, okay, this line, like this line right here, comes up here, comes down there. So just do it once. I mean, hope to God you get it for the, get it right on the first try, because with these portraits, that's when you really start messing yourself up, is when you start getting back in there and trying to rework stuff. So just, if it's not perfect, maybe just settle with what you got, because if you go back in there and start messing with it too much, you start to lose that nice fresh look. And if you're just not happy with it, sometimes it's better just to scrape the whole thing out and start again. It's like John Singer Sargent, one of my favorite artists. You all hear me talk about him a lot. He painted great landscapes, but man, was he a heck of a portrait painter. And he was known to like scrape a painting out 20 times trying to get a face right. He drove some wealthy patron ladies crazy because they think they were almost done sitting for him, and then they'd come in and the entire face would be scraped out, and he'd be like, all right, sit back down, we're going to try this thing again. And they'd be like, oh, it looked almost perfect. And he was like, well, maybe to you, but not to him. So I always say try to get it the best you can. Try to get it the best you can as quickly and as accurately as possible. And if you're painting from life, you got somebody sitting still in front of you for an extended period of time, you kind of feel guilty making them sit there forever. So it helps as a portrait painter to figure out how to really nail this stuff. A slightly bigger brush here, a little bit more of that green. And I'm going to try to describe what I'm doing, but I know there's some stuff I'm not exactly talking about because, man, it gets so difficult at this stage. But I'm going to try my best to kind of tell you what I'm doing. So I'm throwing some more of that green back in, some of that reflected color in there. I want to push this shadow a little bit warmer, or a little bit darker. I want this shadow to come out a little bit, is what I'm saying here, this transition. That tone, that pink tone, is also over here in her cheeks. Look for pink tones, especially in females when you're painting their cheeks. That rosy pink is a great note of color in a portrait. Now, I'm going to go to a slightly larger synthetic brush, but still pretty small. If I can find something like I'm looking for. Let's see. Got all my brushes out over here. Now, something like this right here. So I don't use a lot of these synthetic brushes when I'm painting landscapes, but when we're painting portraits, we come into some little teeny tiny changes and transitions and stuff. I want to get her nostril right here. Okay. Let's get her eyelid, and then we can draw her eyelashes up over top of it. So I haven't gotten this light tone in here yet. It's right in here. I kind of drew those lines around it, but there's a light tone right here. It's not super light though. And make sure you don't get it too light. There is a little highlight in it, so I'll just go a touch lighter. And it's not everywhere, it's just like right here. Yeah. There's also this little highlight in this corner of her eye right here. It's not really a highlight, but it's definitely a light tone. I want to get it. is it? It's right here. See that? Now, let me get those eyelashes. Were you thinking Eilish's eyelashes? Every time I say eyelashes, that's what pops into my head. Is that an onomatopoeia? Onomatopoeia? The heck is an onomatopoeia? So these little tiny details are really bringing her to life here. Now look, her eyes don't have any highlights in them. There's just highlights around them, like her eyeball doesn't actually have a highlight on it. Should we put one in it? There's a little light right there. There's a light catching the top part of her bottom eyelid, so like right here. Oh, to put a highlight in the eyes or not to? Let's do it, what the heck. Just a little one. Maybe right here. It's just a nice, you know, I don't want to call it a trick, but yeah. Makes your eyes look wet. And then we can come back and kind of even shape it up just a little bit, like that. Alright, let's do this. Let's get this dark right in here. What about this line right here? See, there's white of the canvas because we haven't addressed this area. There's a warm shadow line on this right side. It's the left nostril, but the right side of her nose here on the canvas. Comes up further than the one on the left. Right there. Now, here's some little rewarding bit of painting. Let's get this light bit on her lip right here where her lip bends up and catches the light. I'm going to go back into my pink. I've got it already on here. I just got to add a little white to it. See the form that brings out? We can go a little lighter too. Cool it off just a little bit. And then go up, up, up. Little highlights on the lip. And there's a shadow on her nose that makes her nose. It's very unique. Again, it's like, I knew she was, you know, interesting looking, but until you paint somebody, you don't realize what it is that's actually making it. Like this shadow comes up here. Very structural thing happening with her nose here. See that? Now we could push those whites of the eyes just a little lighter. Not a lot, just a little bit. So I'm just using colors now that are already on the palette, which is nice because it really ties in the painting. It's like the whites of her eyes are also the colors in her hair. So it's convenient. Let's get these little shadows on the corners of her lips. Like right here. That other one's out of control. I gotta shape it up. Okay. And there's a little bit of drawing here I'm missing. There's something going on where her chin sticks out that I don't have. I need to get this tone. And I need to get in there and just put it in there like it is. This comes down here, but then her chin comes out. It's the subtlest little things that make a portrait look like the person that you're painting. Let's do this line right here. So you see those little bits of white of the canvas sticking through in spots. It's because I haven't really addressed those areas. Now, just like we did that light, let's go in here with a dark. I'm going to black and ultramarine blue. And really hit this shadow. Comes down here. And then pick back up our tone again and really hit it right here because it's nice and dark under there. Same thing over here. Dark. And now we can start to do a couple little lines in there, not a lot. What's going on down here? Gets a little cooler. Right there. See that? A little cooler. There's a little bit of light pink. A little lighter. And push this a little darker. Step back from it. Just like when you're working on a landscape, you want to step back. It's like there's a little more space between her nose and her lips than what I have. You know, but again, it's like, do I want to get in there and change it too much? Maybe just a little, but we don't have much to work with because we don't want to start shrinking that top lip too much. There's a little light value right on the top of her lip. We can get in there and draw that. That might help. Let's see. We're starting to make her lip too skinny. So let's come back in and draw it up there again just a little bit. So we might have to just sacrifice that perfect drawing for keep that lip looking like her lip. And you have to be okay with making it, you know, as good as you can. Don't drive yourself crazy though. You know, unless you're doing like a commissioned portrait, it's not like likeness is, you know, not the ultimate goal. We want a sense of life and a feeling of life in the person. We want to be able to recognize them. But if it's just a little off, that's okay. What about this light value on her chin? If you start squinting down now, you can really start to see this form coming out here. Yeah, her forehead comes up here a little bit more. Alright, now let's keep working. Let me finish filling in these little tiny white spots around her eyes because they're distracting. It's just like we haven't figured out what goes in there, you know. I'm going to add a little bit of phthalo blue to her eyes because her eyes are very blue, so we're going to exaggerate it. It's like a cold, icy blue. But we can't get it too light. right just a little bit down at the bottom here. That made it look more like her. And then she has a little bit of acne around the bottom of her, right on her chin. Like little spots, little red spots. I don't want to neglect these little spots. Because, and maybe some little freckles too, like, or just little blemishes. They're what make her more human looking. Gotta love it when a celebrity will, you know, have her picture taken and not have all that stuff airbrushed out. How courageous is that, right? In this day and age when everybody's fake, fake, fake. There's another little line right there. So let's I'm gonna add a little bit more of those, just little spots here and there. Right, like that. Now, what the heck's going on at the bottom of her eyelash here, or her eyelid? Right, this needs to be a little lighter. And I'm going to take a little teeny tiny round synthetic brush, like number 0, or a double aught, or whatever the heck you call them when they're tiny, tiny. And just hit some of these little bottom eyelashes. Yep. Alright. Getting close now. What we're going to do is, like I said, I want to get this face done, and then we'll have fun with the background. So we can breathe once we get the face done. We go, we got it done now. We can play around and have some fun with the background. So just little subtle things now that I'm doing. You notice each time my brush hits there, the canvas, it makes it look a little bit more like her. So that's what we want to do. We want to start big and broad, get the main shapes, and then we can fine tune this stuff later. Like, okay, so now let's get, it's like everybody wants to put all the lines in the hair, right? Well, let's put a couple in there. Some dark lines. We got this little tiny brush. These have to be fluid. They're long lines. They're not short, choppy lines. You figure out where you want your brush to go and imagine it going exactly like you want it to go, and then put it to the canvas and let it go there. Couple little ones up here. Not a lot. Hey, see all this mess I made? That's what I was talking about. We don't want to overdo that or overpaint that area before we paint all those little details in. So now there's actually like a little bit of a warm purple, gray, or whatever you want to call it, right along the edge. Throw a little bit of that green in there just to tie all this in. Yeah, that looks nice with that purple. It's like this green is so powerful. It's just bouncing all around and getting into every little bit of her hair and her face. Now, I don't do this very often, but I will come back with a clean brush, nice soft synthetic, and just soften a few little areas, like right in here. Just pull that up, make a nice smoother transition right in here. Figure out where those values transition to. That right in there. Right in here is a soft spot. Like, Now I don't want to do that too much. I'd rather just mix the transition. So what I mean by that is like what I just did right in here, I softened that. We could just mix up the tone that's in between, and this gives you a more painterly look. So mix up that tone that's between that dark and that light and just paint it in. Like that, and then maybe a slightly lighter tone. Good Lord, that green was vibrant. Okay. So it's subtle differences right there. So now we painted the transition instead of just blending it and making it super soft. Her eye's just a little bit too light over there on the right, I can tell you right now. The right of the canvas, her left eye. I want to darken that a little. Right, like that. Okay, we're getting close. I'll make sure I got all this how I want it, so I can breathe again. I hold my breath a lot when I'm painting portraits. If I stop talking and you hear me fall on the floor, just give me a second. I'll be back with you. It means I held my breath for too long. Uh-oh, I'm whistling. That means I'm really concentrating. I whistle when I work. I need to get this little bit of light down in here. It can't be too light, but it's like this little light piece of her eye right here. It's an important part of drawing. Okay. I keep saying that, but then I see something else. I'm getting there, I promise. I'm trying to do this fast because I still want that spontaneity in my painting that I try to achieve in my landscapes too. So if I take too long and I could overthink it and overwork it, I don't want that. Let me get this line in here again. I kind of lost it. I had it and then I lost it. It's important to the drawing of her face that is this line right here. See that? It might be a tad bit too wide, so let's thin it up a little. Right there. So, man, it's so easy to mess these things up. All right. I need to get this eye to look right and then get the heck out of it. I think what it is, let me try this. I think this needs to come up just a little bit, this light. Or it needs to be a little darker. And I think her actual pupil needs to be a little darker too. Sometimes you just gotta wrestle with these things. It's so elusive sometimes, like what it is that happens. It changes something. and it shouldn't be. You should have an idea of what you did wrong, but sometimes with portraits it's just tricky business. My hat goes off to these professional portrait painters. I mean, some people are just so good at painting portraits. I like to do it because, like I said, I don't want to just be a landscape painter or just just paint the figure but not really know how to get in there and do the face. You see that a lot. You'll see people do like figures and then they'll just put a big hat on that covers the face or something because they're like, I don't do faces. But I think it's important to be a painter if you're a painter. Not just a painter of this or that, but to actually be able to paint whatever you want to paint. It's important. I don't want to... That's close right there. I just want to get it to where it's close, and then, it's like I said, if you start messing with these things too much, you can really mess them up. And another thing that'll happen is you'll have a little area like this that's bugging you, and it starts to look fine, but you just keep looking at it, and so it starts to look crazy because you're just staring at that one spot. So don't forget to like back up and look at the rest of your piece, and just see it as a whole too, and don't just zero in on one little area. So pretty soon what I'm going to do is transition here, and we'll start painting that background. A little bit more red down here. That red looks nice with that green. Warm this shadow up just a little bit. Cut back into this little dark that I made here. I lost my little highlight. Tell you what, let's do this. Something's not right there. Let's make it right. Remember what I was saying about Sargent scraping areas out? He scraped the whole paint. He scraped the whole painting down sometimes. But let's just go back in here and redraw that eye. So if you have to do that, you have to do that. We're going to do it just the same way we did it. Like, start with the dark of the eye there. Let's get that shadow in above her eye. Get that little bit of a shadow under her eye. Now let's go back with our dark line. Blue for her iris, but again I don't want it too light. That's what I did the first time, I made it too light. top of her eyelid. Needs to be a little lighter so we can see it. The dark line that makes up where her eyelashes are. The white of her eye, which is again like a gray, dark, kind of medium gray, something like the colors in her hair. Then there's this. This line up here is not really super dark. It's actually got a little bit of burnt sienna to it, so just to warm it up just a little bit. But if it's too light, we won't be able to see it, so we gotta be able to see it. Go back into my ivory black. And just don't have a lot of that going on the bottom. There's not a lot of those little eyelashes. Let's put a little bit of that lighter blue in there. Slightly lighter tone right in here. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone for a minute and let my eyes rest. Come back here and get this shape. I think that's looking better. Like I said, sometimes you just have to go with the flow and be like, okay, that's good for now. It might not be perfect, but it's not distracting me. Yeah. So let's get in here and do some background stuff now. I'm going to lay out some more white paint for this background. Alright, nice and thick paint. We don't necessarily need to put mixed medium into it because we're going to be putting medium in our brush. I just want this to be a cool gray, very light. So just going back into my cool tones here. Nice light, and we can have some fun with this. We can use a great big brush. Like a number 12, lots of paint. And get this value that we want. There's not a lot of I don't want a lot of variation in this background. Sometimes you want variation. I want this to be kind of a flat tone. Tons of paint, just to make some real interesting brush strokes. And we can have it go different ways here. I think I just want to create some texture and a little bit of play. Now this line is really smooth right along her where her hair comes down. So let's do that first. Same thing over here. Okay. Now come back and work back into that. And you can play around with this. This doesn't have to be, you don't have to have all your brush strokes going the same way. In fact, we want a little variety back there. It's going to make things interesting. So we can make the background interesting by using the texture of the paint, even though it's not a even though there's not a lot of variation in the tone. Paint this up to the hair. Let it blend just a little bit at the edge. Paint area into one area up into the next. I want to bring that. I don't want to make that hair any thinner at the top, so I'm going to make a gray tone and bring that out into that white. Don't just paint up to the edge though. Paint one area into the next area. So I can paint this up a little bit higher than it needs to be, and then come back with my white paint and cut back into it. That's what I mean by paint one area into the next area. It's a little higher on that one side. And let's get a little bit more of a dark line right in here. There's a couple little stray hairs. This edge is really going to tell us a lot about the texture of the hair. We don't want a super hard line here. We want some softness. That's going to give us the feeling of that this hair is soft and that there's, that it's not like a scarf on her head or something. And that's 95% done, and it might be 100% done. I'll come back and look at it, just like my landscapes. I like to, actually I see one more thing. I like to kind of get it to this point and then give my eyes a break, especially with portraits, because it's just so taxing on your eyeballs, all that looking at everything. I'm trying to make things right. I don't want to, I might scratch a little few lines in here, just a couple little light lines. Like I always say, don't overdo this. Just do a couple of this kind of stuff. You could get carried away and just make it look ridiculous, so don't do that. And we're gonna I'm gonna sign it. I'm looking. It's difficult to tell sometimes where to sign a painting, especially with portraits. You usually tell if you want to sign it on the right side or the left side in a landscape, because there's usually weight on one side or the other, and it kind of dictates that you want to balance it out. But with a portrait, it's a little different, because sometimes you might have the portrait centered in the canvas like we have here. So what we're going to do is, because we got all this going on down here, I think what I want to do, let me think about it for just a second while I finish off these last little bits. So thanks so much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. I've been getting a lot of requests to do some portrait painting on here. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. We're getting close to 10,000 subscribers, so really excited about that. I appreciate all the new subscribers and the old subscribers, but I just want to give a shout out to all the new ones. Check out my Patreon page if you haven't already. It's in the link. You have to click below this video, expand the description so you can see the description down below the video. And there's a link to go to my Patreon page where you'll find more content, more full demos, some product reviews, and just some tips and tricks and that sort of thing. So that's all exclusive for my patrons, but it's only $1 a month to sign up. It's kind of a pay what you want. You have to pay at least $1 a month, but you can also alter your pledge and make it for a little bit more, just whatever you feel comfortable paying. So that's in the link below. And then also I have a link to my website where my landscapes and paintings are available for purchase. So be sure you get on there and check that out. And give this video a like. I appreciate all the likes and comments. That all helps out. And make sure you click the bell for notifications when you subscribe, so you can get so you get notified when I upload new content. So get out there and push some paint around. If you want to try a portrait, just take your time and be patient with yourself. These portraits are probably the hardest thing to paint. Like I said, my hat goes off to people who are professional portrait painters and do this all the time, because man, it really takes a lot of looking and a lot of patience and a lot of practice to get it. I made it a point to like work really hard on figuring out how the heck to paint portraits, because I was never very good at it when I first started painting. So I hope you are patient with yourself and allow yourself some time to paint some goofy looking portraits, because you have to get through those goofy paintings to paint the good ones. And so it's no different with landscapes too, same way. So allow yourself some time to figure out how to do it, and just know that the more you do it, the better you'll get at it, the easier it'll get, the more you'll like the finished product. And there's no real way to sidestep putting in the hours at the easel. So no matter what you're painting, it's an art. So anything like that, anything that is an art takes time, and that's why it's an art, and that's why it's so rewarding when you finally get the hang of it. So I'm gonna quit talking and quit painting before I mess this thing up and figure out where to sign it. I think I'll sign it in the bottom right. There's a little bit more space over here. It kind of gets crowded over here. I'm afraid my signature will get a little too crowded. And then I also want to pick a color that's going to look good with the whole color scheme, so I don't want anything out of the ordinary down there. Maybe kind of like this dark purple. Alright, and that's a wrap. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll look forward to doing another video soon. I'll probably put a new Patreon video up soon. I might even do a self-portrait for Patreon for my patrons on there. So we'll be talking a little bit about self-portraits, and you get to see that if you're signed up on there. So thanks so much for watching. Get out there, push the paint around, work on a portrait, give yourself some time to figure it out, and like I said, be patient with yourself, and have fun. That's the most important part, and I look forward to seeing you again at the next video. Thanks for watching.